Here are some of the most obvious reasons why your ego keeps you in this state of turmoil rather than peace. Most important, your ego has been with you since childhood. It has been nurtured by almost everyone you've ever known. Generations of those nurturers have also been dominated by their egos. Your ego wants to survive. If it can keep you in a state of inner turmoil, it will block you from knowing your spiritual self. From the ego's perspective, God is a huge threat, so it will do all that it can to keep you from experiencing that inner peacefulness where God's voice is so beautifully clear. Your ego does not want you to change. The idea of yourself as self-important and special nourishes ego, keeping it healthy and operating at full strength. Even though ego itself is an illusion, just a false idea that you carry around with you, it behaves as if it really had a life of its own. Your ego will make every effort to convince you that you do not need to change. In fact, if you're asking yourself why you shouldn't feel special, you are listening to it right now. These are the kinds of thoughts that have kept you from making the changes leading to inner peace. The ego thrives on fear. When you are afraid, you are at the mercy of the ego. Fear will drive you to behave in ways that undermine your sacred self. Your higher self tells you that there is nothing to fear, that love is the answer to everything, and that God is what love is all about. Your loving presence assures you that you do not need to feel guilty or fearful, and that if you do, it will subside when you experience inner peace. When you experience love within, you have no guilt and no fear. You know that everything you are experiencing is in order, including your woes, which are your greatest teachers, and the death of your body, which is ordained for all the world of the manifest. You know that death is a reward, not a punishment. Therefore you have nothing to fear unless you listen to your ego encouraging fear and dismissing God. Your ego wants you to be on the move, looking for more things to consume and more possessions to own. The more you are on the move in your life, the less time you will have for knowing your spiritual base. Ego cheers you on to stay busy, to keep moving, and to avoid the inner quest where your ego faces restraint. Your ego wants you to face outward. It wants you to continue facing the wrong way so that you cannot experience the presence of God in your life. By facing away rather than inward, you ensure the strong presence of your ego forever. The consequences are that you will continually feel the pressure to compare yourself with others, the need to defeat others in order to feel powerful or even worthwhile, to have more and better toys, to accumulate more trophies. All of this facing outward is the work of the ego. When you refuse to listen, it shouts that you must be upset when others get ahead of you, that you are worthless when you lose, that being number one is more important than anything, that to settle for less is to admit to being a loser. All of these beliefs are deeply ingrained within you. It is very difficult for you to even imagine not having them because the work of your ego and the egos of so many others have been working overtime, convincing you that this is the only way to be. Facing outward brings about a sense of inner conflict and agitation that keeps you pursuing the gold stars that the ego offers. These are a few of the more obvious payoffs your ego uses to keep you in a confrontational rather than a peaceful mood. I have provided some alternatives to the persuasive tactics of your ego. Keep in mind that you can restrain this ego simply by the power of your own will. All it takes is a determination to live by the dictates of your higher self and a willingness to act on that determination rather than succumb to the easier path of the ego. Here are a few ideas for putting peace in your life permanently. Thinking of yourself as a peaceful person is the first step, but it is only the first step. The thought must translate into action in order for you to know peace. Work at curbing your inclination to create confrontation and disruption in the lives of others. A simple practice of pausing and asking yourself whether your ego, which loves turmoil, or your higher self, which loves peace, is about to act. That pause will help you to send out a peaceful response even in situations where you are feeling impatient or misunderstood. In those situations, you will be able to state simply, for example, "You are really having a rough day," to a hassled clerk rather than, "I've been waiting for 15 minutes already and I'm really feeling abused." Send out peace by catching yourself and then consulting your loving presence for a response rather than relying on your ego. Practice releasing the emotions of fear and guilt and replacing them with love and forgiveness and kindness. Release the guilt by forgiving yourself and vowing to avoid that kind of conduct in the future. You do not need the guilt unless you're going to allow your ego to continue its dominance over your life forever. For example, make a list of all the things that keep you from loving yourself. Your list might include being overweight and jealous or nervous or addicted or incompetent or uncoordinated. Then, regardless of how much effort it takes, reverse your mental sentences and state that you love yourself while being fat, while being addicted, and so on. This will help you to feel peaceful about the choices you've made and to realize that you are not that body or those desires. You are the invisible chooser. As you become more peaceful with the chooser, you will begin to replace the unhealthy choice in a spirit of love. Examine everything that offends you and see if you can get your ego out of the picture. If hunger and starvation in the world offend you, try shifting to a new awareness. Somehow, in some way that I do not comprehend, these things occur in divine order, and so too does my desire to change it exist in divine order. Shed what offends you and act on your desire to make corrections. There will then be no need to fight. Similarly, if you find someone else's behavior offensive, you are interpreting that behavior from your own self-absorbed position, which is that they shouldn't act the way they do. You choose to be offended, hurt, or angry by their behavior. But they are acting the way they are. Your being offended is your ego talking to you to keep you anxious and upset. If you don't take it personally, and if you see the behavior for what it is, you can work to eradicate the evils of the world unimpeded by your ego's encouragement to be offended. Keep in mind that grievances bring turmoil, while communication brings peace. If you want peace in your life, rid yourself of your grievances. The way to shed these grievances is to let go of your own self-absorption and to practice forgiveness rather than revenge. As you let go, you will feel a sense of peace overtaking you. If you are angry towards someone in your life, no matter how difficult you may find it, work at communicating with that person about your aggrieved feelings. Your embarrassment or inner anguish over being wronged is just what your ego wants you to experience, since it will keep you away from your sacred quest and keep you in the clutches of your anxiety-loving ego. Keep this little sentence ready to consult. Judgment and peace are antithetical. A Course in Miracles says the strain of constant judgment is virtually intolerable. It is curious that an ability so debilitating would be so deeply cherished. You must make a daily effort to look upon others without condemnation. Every judgment takes you away from your goal of peace. Your ego loves your judgments because with them you remain in a constant state of anguish and remorse. Keep in mind that you do not define anyone with your judgment. You only define yourself as someone who needs to judge. Judging others with condemnation removes the possibility of your experiencing love. If you can practice just being still rather than condemning, you will get to the bliss I am talking about. You do not have to pretend that you love something that you loathe. Just get still and let the judgments subside. Peace is not found in being right or being hurt or being angry. By all means, work toward righting the wrongs you perceive, but do it with an understanding that an angry heart keeps you from knowing God on the path of your sacred quest. Peace will come to you when you are a healer rather than a judge. Essentially, embracing the truth is welcoming your higher self and coming to know God. All that is not authentic will drop away automatically. Your ego works hard to convince you that you are separate and better than everyone else, and you know that it does not take kindly to your embracing anything that threatens its existence. But remember that this is your inauthentic self, your false self. Deception is going to play a big role in your life when you embrace ego as your guide. Therefore, in order to abandon your reliance on that false self with all of its deception, you will have to make a new agreement with truth. I encourage you to actually write yourself a contract in which you agree to include truth as your companion in your thoughts, in your conversations, and in your life. This is a big challenge and perhaps difficult for you, but it is guaranteed to lead you to the path of your sacred self. Begin by looking honestly and fearlessly at who you are beneath all the surface trappings that you have surrounded yourself with. You have a human storyline, as does every person who has ever lived on this planet. That storyline begins with your conception, continues through your childhood, and all of your personal triumphs and tribulations, right up to this very moment. Your ego tells you this is your kingdom, your true identity, and therefore you must do whatever it takes to make this story turn out to be a good one for you. But you already know by virtue of listening to this tape that this is not so. There is a divine whisper within you telling you that this is not your ultimate home, and that the things this life offers are unfulfilling to a part of you. You sense that the real you does not value appearance and possessions or achievements or even physical strength or talent or intellect, because all these things eventually atrophy and disappear. You know that there is an eternal aspect of you beneath the surface, and that for this part of you, only the truth will suffice. It is similar to the truth Michelangelo knew as he sculpted the statue of David. He described knowing that the statue of David was already inside the block of marble. Part of his artistic life was spent chipping away the excess to reveal God's creation. Try to visualize your inner life in this fashion. What exists within you is not some kind of hideousness that needs to be lied about. There's nothing imperfect about you that requires you to create a whole world of deception in order to make you worthy in the eyes of others. There is a loving presence residing within you. It is as perfect as Michelangelo's David, just waiting for you to allow it to emerge. I have worked very hard on this matter of truth in my own life. For a large part of my life, I have had only a very casual relationship with truth. It was never my intention to be malicious or harm anyone, but I allowed myself to reach into my ego's large repertoire of deceptions. This casual relationship with truth kept me from knowing my higher self. I had learned to listen to my ego rather than to my higher self whenever it was convenient to explain away my own weaknesses or inadequacies. If I wanted to have an affair, I found it easy to explain it away as my entitlement to the pleasures of the moment. Lying to protect that pleasure was simply what my ego demanded. The ego was very strong in this direction. I found myself on the spiritual path as the result of a calling rather than as a conscious choice. As this happened, I saw that deep within me, I did not accept myself as a divine being. I was at the mercy of my false self, which told me to project an image to the world and did not want me to know God or the truth that is embodied in that knowing. Consequently, I was deceiving myself to maintain that false self. Gradually, it became intolerable to live with the lies, even the small distortions. The truth terrified my ego in the beginning. Then, as I tamed my ego, truth became an enjoyable feeling of freedom. Truth does literally set us free, as St. John told us in the New Testament. The truth shall set you free. Truth sets you free because you no longer are focused on yourself and what kind of an image you are projecting or protecting. You find your identification in the world beyond, with that which is eternal. We see and hear lies all the time. The media is filled with advertising claiming all manner of things that have nothing to do with reality. According to advertising, you can recapture your youth if you drive a certain car, or find love if you wear the advertised fragrance, or gain new energy if you eat a certain cereal, or regain lost intimacy if you use a certain deodorant. Our government promotes its policies with lies and spends money it doesn't have. Legislators tell us that we cannot have health care because we cannot afford it, yet they legislate themselves comprehensive care. We are supposed to believe that there is no money available to assist the poor and ill, yet we eagerly finance wars in faraway places. We've all become used to lies. You may have even convinced yourself that to tell lies is a worthwhile activity. When you adopt distortion and deception, the problem is that you'll always need more of the same to keep covering your tracks. The same is true for our society. Ultimately, as we move toward a more spiritual base, the lies will decrease, both in our culture and in our personal lives. At first, when you discontinue lying, it stings. It's like a new remedy on an old open wound. Your willingness to think, feel, and act truthfully will expose some warts. The warts are you. The mistakes are you. They are not unique, and they do not say anything ugly about you. The sting and the discomfort will be soothed as you let go of the need to deceive. As you gain this self-awareness, you also grow in the awareness of not being your physical body. You no longer need to project anything other than your peaceful divineness to friends, family, and even strangers. You've made the transition from phony to real in a holy instant. You recognize your inner sanctity and are willing to forgive yourself for any and all mistakes now viewed as lessons. You have moved to truth. The inner knowing that you no longer have to lie or distort anything for the sake of the approval of others, or to elevate yourself in others' eyes, is the freedom that truth brings. The way I figure it, that if Saul of Tarsus, a murdering thief, can be transformed in a moment of holy insight and become the apostle St. Paul simply by letting in the truth and living it, so can Wayne Dyer admit to his mistakes of the ego and live the truth, and so can you. As Thomas Merton put it, we must be true inside to ourselves before we can know a truth that is outside of us. Moving from phony to real is first being true inside and then experiencing the truth of living it. As you begin to live these truths, you not only turn your own world around, you also affect the transformation of the world around you. The truth not only sets you free, but it will set the world free as well. The The world's ego cannot stand up to the celestial light of the truth any more than your personal ego can. The distortions that you see around you, the cheating, the lying, stealing, and killing, will begin to disappear as we reach within our own individual selves and transform the ego energy. Here are some suggestions for ridding yourself of deception and embracing truth full time. Make an inner commitment to establish a new relationship with truth. The way to make this happen is to catch yourself when you're exaggerating or deceiving anyone, including yourself. Then silently tell yourself that you are about to puff yourself up by overstating the truth. Decide to simply relate exactly what happened, no more, no less, and see how that feels. You will discover as you catch yourself immediately before the lie that you are consulting your higher self, which flourishes in truth instead of giving in to ego demands to be false. You will enjoy a deeper, richer experience of life that feels refreshing compared with the phony presentation of yourself seeking approval. Be on the alert for inner dialogues that dwell on your accomplishments rather than the path of purpose. Recently, I remember giving a speech to a large group of radio broadcasters and was very pleased with my performance. After the lecture, as I was jogging, I was reliving the lecture experience. At the very moment that I was seeing in my mind's eye the crowd getting to its feet and applauding, I turned a corner and smacked my elbow into a wall so hard that it sent a sharp pain through my arm that lasted for several weeks. Every time I felt that pain, I was reminded to get my ego out of the way and stop focusing on myself. I was reminded of my purpose and my service and not to get caught up in the applause.